Good morning. In the last episode, I installed the Kaiser Willys steering box conversion kit and tie rod on my Jeep. In this episode, we're going to convert the steering column to work with the Saginaw box. The kit comes with this floor plate. I'm going to install a new Kaiser Willys column tube. You can reuse your old tube, but mine's already bent and dented and rusty. So this is a part that Kaiser Willys offers as well. The kit comes with this collapsible Saginaw mount, so it has about 8 inches of travel, and we're going to use that to connect the two parts together. This kit also comes with the Borgeson universal joints, so these are really high quality, strong, safe joints to use. And it comes with the little bushing that converts your Ross column to a Saginaw style. The first step in this process is to remove the old steering box from the Jeep. You may have to remove the driver's side fender to do this if you have the stock engine. This Jeep has an engine swap. I have a little more room in there, so I'm going to attempt to get it out without removing the fender. Another option is to remove the worm gear separately from the box. Since we're not going to be reusing the steering box itself, it's okay if the ball bearings fall out. So there are some options there if you don't want to take out your fender. Let's get to work removing the steering box. First order of business is to remove the drag link. That's the little Z-bar that connects the box to the bell crank. I have a little homemade tool to get in there. We'll just remove the cotter pin and back that out and get the drag link out of the vehicle. So this one's actually in pretty good shape. I'll keep it for a spare, but I'm really happy to be getting rid of this. This is a common wear item, and just every little bit of wiggle that you get from each steering component adds up to a lot of wiggle. And this new setup will completely eliminate multiple moving parts from the steering system, which is always a good thing. Now I'm going to remove the steering wheel and drop some tools. Hopefully this wheel comes off easily. It's just an 1.25 inch socket on the top. Sometimes these can be really stuck on. I've had this wheel off fairly recently. Looks like it doesn't want to come off, so I got to get the puller out. The steering wheel puller tool is fabulous. If you've ever tried to take one of these off before, you know how much of a struggle it can be, and also it's a real bummer when you damage your wheel. I've used this many times now, and it always gets the job done, and it doesn't damage your wheel. The MB wheels are pretty forgiving, this style wheel, because they don't have the plastic around the bottom, but the CJ style or the black like Bakelite or rubberized wheels, or a nice white wagon wheel, you don't want to damage it. So this puller is well worth the investment. Works every time. Once your wheel is off, it's just a matter of removing the little column bracket bolts. They're just little 1/4 inch bolts on the dash. Then I'll go underneath and remove the actual steering box bolts. Save all the column parts, the brackets, and the little canvas welting, because you will reuse that. Okay, everything's freed up on this end. Now we gotta go down in the dark, greasy zone. I decided to leave the fender on and just disassemble the gearbox. So I have an oil pan under there catching all the nasty old goop, and you take the side cover off the gear or the steering box and the 3 top bolts off, and then you'll have bearings falling out, but for this purpose that's okay. So this cover right here, take that off, and then the top bolts where you shim it, and then the steering shaft should pop right out of the box. As I'm doing that, there we go. Looks like I didn't have to take it all apart, but it stayed together, so aside from making a huge mess, we're not much farther behind than when we started. But I do need to remove the worm gear shaft anyway, so probably should have wore gloves. This is pretty nasty. Got grease all over my arm. The Jeep life, right? You need to remove your gearbox and shaft to this point. So you'll reuse the tube, the clamp, and the worm shaft. It was old and tired, time for a refresh. So when you take the nut off, save that, you'll reuse that along with the spring, and pull the tube off the shaft. If your shaft is bent or rusted extensively, this would be a good time to replace it. Now I have the worm gear shaft in the vise. We're going to cut it off just above the bearing surface. So this tube is hollow all the way down to about right here. We don't want to have to cut it multiple times, but we also don't want to cut it too short. So your goal is to cut it right where it becomes hollow. So you see this is the bearing surface where the clip goes, and then there's a little groove right there. I'm going to cut it just above this top groove here. We'll probably end up cutting up a little bit farther, but I don't want to make it too short. So you can use a Sawzall. I'm going to use a cutoff wheel. You could use a hacksaw, any method you want, just to make a nice straight cut on this shaft. Now I'm just going to take a flap disc and smooth out my cut and put a little bevel on the edge. Now that we have the end of the shaft cut off, this is the bushing that comes with your kit. This will hold the bottom of the shaft centered in the tube. This has a 7/8 inch diameter inner bore, and even without the rust on here, these shafts are just a little bit over that. So you have to find a way with the tools that you have to smooth this down. I go up about 3 inches, that way we can adjust this length, because you're going to need about 3/4 of an inch, 7/8 of an inch protruding from the bottom for the U-joint to attach to. This is a rather challenging part of this procedure if you don't have the right tools, because it's important that this is round, it's smooth. You could take a flap disc and just go around it, but you're going to have ridges. It's going to be inconsistent. So the best way to do this is to either have a lathe and put it in the lathe yourself, or send it to someone, or let a buddy or a machine shop turn this down, or sand it down and get it to fit this bushing. You want it to be a nice snug fit, but not too tight that you have to drive it in and out. I have seen some creative ways where people have put the steering wheel on, put this shaft in the column tube, and then someone has, turning the steering wheel while you're working a flap disc or a piece of sandpaper. It's not a ton of material, but it's enough that you can't just, rub it with a piece of sandpaper and get it smooth. So I'm just putting a micrometer on it here, or caliper, and it's right around 900 thousandths, and the inside of the bushing is 875, which is what it's supposed to be. So you're talking 25 thousandths of material that you want to take off pretty much perfectly. So I'm going to put this in my lathe and just take some sandpaper and clean it up and shrink it down. So we got to take off 25 thousandths. You could also use a file, so I might rough it up with the file and then take it down with sandpaper. This is the setup I'm going to use. So I just have the nut on the shaft in the chuck of my lathe, little steady rest, and then out here's where the business is happening. This is a really small lathe. You don't need much of a machine to do that. If your chuck is large enough to pass the whole shaft through, that's obviously better, but whatever you can do to spin this thing. You could also probably set something up with a drill and have a buddy help you. We just have to turn this down 25 thousandths and get that bushing to slide on up to about here. So I'm going to focus my work just right here on the end and get it done. So I'm probably going to take off 10 thousandths just in rust. The bushing is just starting to go on, so I'm pretty good right at the end. It almost goes in, so now I'm going to focus from that point up. And I think I got it to where I'm happy. So you want it to be able to slide smoothly like that without having to like twist and push on it, but you don't want any side to side play. So I was going just a tiny bit at a time, test fitting it. It's a little looser down here, but we're going to end up cutting this off, and then it stops tight there. So if I need to cut this farther up, I'll have to put it back in the lathe. But right there is just a perfect fit. All my parts are prepped, so your kit will come with this plate too. This is the floor plate. I drilled the holes in it, so you'll just drill them. This is what ties the column to the floor, so you can drill them anywhere you want that doesn't hit any wires or brake lines or wherever it's easiest for you to get to them. This is the original clamp off of my steering box, so this is in the same location it was before. It was on the column tube. I fitted the new tube that's not all bent and rusty, and if you notice I have this welded here. I just welded part of one side, so that still allows it to clamp and hold some pressure on that. So you could weld most of the way around the top, but there's really not a lot of force on this, so that weld right there is plenty. And then on the bottom side I have my bushing. Now there's many different ways and many different scenarios and situations and Jeep setups. I found when I mocked everything up, for me it was best to have the bushing pretty much right at the floor. That raises my lower angle up a little more. So you want to utilize both joints as much as possible. You're not going to get them both the same as you would want in a drive shaft, but I wanted as much angle on the first joint to take some of the angle off the second. So by bringing the column up into the engine bay as far as I could go, it helped split the difference up. Because remember, you're shooting for a max of 35 degrees. So, and I have my tube lined up. I had to shorten this tube, so you'll make it whatever length you want, and that's when we cut the steering wheel column as well. And so I had to cut a new notch in it to allow the clamp to pinch it, and then just like with the tie rods, span your bolt with that slot in the tube. The tube is not welded, so the tube can turn, you can slide. It's a pretty tight fit. I took a flap disc and kind of smoothed off the edge of the tube and then put it in there. So you can see it does still turn. You're only welding the clamp to the plate. I would do it in place, put your bushing in, put your tube in, tack it in place, then you can remove it and weld it, but that keeps it centered properly in the hole. Now I have the shaft on the floor. It comes with a short grub screw and a long one. In the instructions, it tells you to hold everything in place with the short one, mark the hole, and then this end is hollow. This is the 1-inch D shaped end. You drill a 3/8 hole under that, and the longer set screw will go all the way through and press against the other side, and then this one is just to hold that in place. On the other end you have this solid D shaft, and this little grub screw will hold it in place. So we're going to get everything mocked up in place before we start drilling for any of these set screws. I'm going to use a transfer punch once I have it in place. You want as much engagement as possible. In the event that this flexes all the way, you don't want it to hit. So I would recommend putting the joint all the way, sliding the shaft up till it touches, and then you know you have full engagement, but you're not impairing the movement of the joint. So I did that on all 3 connections. Same way with the spud shaft. That's another solid shaft. Run it in as far as it'll go and flex your joint, make sure it doesn't hit, and then tighten up these little grub screws and get it ready to drill. The very last connection I will make is where this joint attaches and rides against this bushing. One mistake you don't want to make is to not have your steering wheel pressed on all the way when you drill and set that set screw, because as you tighten this nut, it draws that up, and if you're tightening the nut and you already drilled and set this one, you're going to end up crushing everything together and you won't be able to turn your wheel. So we want to put everything together, tighten the steering wheel on all the way, And then we know this isn't going to move anymore. And then you just take this shaft, slide it up till you have good engagement, and then mark with your set screws. So that's really important, because otherwise you'll get it all together, you'll drill it, and then you'll find out when you torque your steering wheel on, you won't be able to turn the wheel. So we definitely don't want that. When measuring for the length of your shaft, you want to note that this has a collapsible feature, which is good in the event you ever hit anything, and it helps you take it in and out. So you'll notice there's a little groove machined there. I think there's 8 inches of travel. You don't want it to be all the way out, because you want to have good engagement here, but you want to have quite a bit of play. So this goes all the way into there. It's very tight, which is good. So just get an idea of where the travel is, and you want the majority of the travel, the extension, out, so that in the event there's an accident or something hits this, it can crush that far before it drives up into the tub, into the cockpit where you're sitting. So keep that in mind when you're measuring. This piece is hollow, this piece is solid. I had to cut about 2 inches off of this. You can do either end, just make sure you take into account the travel. You don't want it all the way collapsed or extended when you make your cut. So kind of have it in the middle and just pick which end you want to cut. This is just regular steel. It cuts good with an abrasive wheel, and then bevel the edge so it slides back into the joints. I have everything where it needs to be, so I'm going to mark where to drill the shaft. So I'm going to use a transfer punch. These are really handy. Find one that fits inside the threads and make sure it's centered as best as possible, and just give it a little whack. It's just regular steel, so it's not super hard to mark. And we're going to do that on all of the joints. The hollow end of the larger D tube already has a 3/8 hole drilled in it, so that one will line up just like that. And then you take one of the long grub screws and thread it in. This one goes all the way through, so you got to make sure you have it lined up. So now that that screw is all the way through, pressing against the other side, this smaller one is just a locking screw. For final assembly, these will get Loctite, but I'm just mocking everything up right now because there's a good chance I'll have to take it back apart. Make sure you have enough room wherever this is spinning to clear these grub screws. If they don't, take them out and cut the end off that doesn't have the Allen slot, because you you don't want to make that mistake. You'll end up with a piece of threaded rod. So on the spud shaft, I'm just using one set screw to hold it in place, and I drilled a dimple. This is a solid piece of stock, and it has the D slot, so you're not worried about it spinning. You just have to make sure it doesn't slide out, which really couldn't go anywhere, but you want to make sure you don't have any of your steering parts moving while you're driving. That would be bad. So snug that one up. And when we're all done, we'll put Loctite on these, snug up the Allen bolt, and then lock it in place with a wrench on the nut. So, and then this one acts as a little set screw as well. This one we already have. That's the one that goes all the way through. And then a little set screw to hold it in place. So this side's good. And we'll flip it over here. I made my center punch mark on that one. And in the instructions, there's a PDF that I recommend you download. It gives you all the drill sizes and the drill depths for all of these connections, so there's no guesswork. Now we're completely ready to put everything in the Jeep and kind of do our final mock-up. There's a lot of mocking up in this job, and I recommend you take the time to do it because these parts are not cheap and you want it to be just right. So the more you can take it in and out and make sure everything's perfect before you cut, weld, or drill, the better. An important tip I have is just cut the worm gear off this, but don't polish or turn this down for the bushing until you're done and the length is cut, because once I got it in the Jeep, I put it down and through, and I wanted to shorten up my column. So when I did that, I ended up having too much sticking out. You need about, there we go. You need about 3/4 of an inch sticking up for the U-joint to slide over that. And I had about 2.5 inches too much once I got the length set. So that meant I had to cut it off and polish up farther up the shaft. So you only have to polish about that much, so you might as well only do it once. So you can install all this without the bushing. It'll fit down through the column, get your length cut, and then you only have to polish a little bit. So it just took more time, and I want you to get done as fast as possible. So that's my tip from my little oopsie having to do it twice. So I have my steering wheel torqued in. I'm going to install a new top bearing in this column, but I don't want to do it until it's all done and in the Jeep, because this shaft has some rust and there's some changes in the size, and you'll sometimes ruin the bearing if you pull the column up through. So I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to slide the bushing in here, tap it down all the way. When you snug up this clamp, that will hold that bushing in place, and then the U-joint will hold it in as well. So I'm gonna go stick this in the Jeep and get this thing in. All right, so just get it started up in there. Get your column support in place. I'd recommend kind of tightening everything up exactly as it's going to be when it's completely installed. Cool. This will give you an idea of how the floor plate is installed. So you can see the clamp at the bottom. Make sure when you weld this on and drill your holes that if you have pedals that go anything down here that you need clearance for, that this is in an appropriate spot. Also make sure to give yourself room to be able to get a wrench and tighten this. If you have to work on this, you want to make it easy on yourself. Also make sure you don't cover up your master cylinder cover. So just pretty basic. You could put this in either direction, anywhere you want really. I just found this orientation was the best for me. All right, thanks for staying with me. I have got some primer on my floor plate. Everything's drilled, mocked up, cut to length, ready to go. I'm gonna get it installed on the Jeep and then I'll show you. It's done, check it out. Start on the inside, so there's my floor plate. All bolted in, the new column. I did notch my dash a little bit and modified the column bracket to move the column up to give me a little more belly room. And I think I'll probably install a 15-inch MB wheel from Kaiser Willys. Got the new column bearing and spring in there, and it's pretty cool. When you move the wheel just a tiny bit, there's no play. That's a big upgrade. So it's way down in there, but there's the U-joint on the firewall side. So I kept it up as high and as far back as I could, and combined I'm right around 36 degrees, so I'm right at the max, but the U-joint doesn't seem to bind at all. They do offer a double cardan style U-joint if you have excessive angle. Obviously this isn't a factory engine Jeep, but it would work the same way. Just goes right down to the box, and you can see the lower U-joint right there. So right here is where the stock engine mount is on a 2A. Obviously mine doesn't have that. I'm up above the mount there. I have seen people come straight back and go through the mount and then put a double joint here. But if you can go over the top of it, you won't need that double joint. So if you have room, that's what I would recommend. I'm really excited to get this wrapped up. So now I'll get my winch mount back in here, put the bumper back on, and then in the next video, you'll see we'll do the pump and hoses. Now, since I have a Mazda engine in this Jeep, the pump will be different, but the hoses will be the same. I'm gonna use a hose kit that I think you'll be able to get through Kaiser Willys as well. that will be kind of a universal hose kit. It's one I used on my other Jeep that will work with whatever style pump you use, whether you put like a GM style pump on your L head, or the really common swap right now is the Volvo 12 volt power steering pump. So this kit will work with that as well. So hopefully by the end of the next video, this will be running and driving with one hand, steering, and I'm really excited. I'll do a road test for you as well, just to see how it handles and steers compared to my other Jeep that's completely stock. So be sure to use code REDEYEGARAGE10 at Kaiser Willys to save 10% off your order. And as always, thanks for watching. Catch you later.